Now we come to a number of conclusions from this exercise we've been engaged in to study the evolution of U.S. regulation and the standard setting process for financial reporting over almost 100 years. During the 34 years of the two part-time accounting standard setters, the Committee on Accounting Procedure and the Accounting Principles Board, 4 strong-willed, conservative SEC chief accountants tightly monitored their deliberations and draft standards and would frequently intervene in the process. So there was a very close relationship between the two, and both of the standard-setting bodies realized that little could get through unless the chief accountant somehow was on their side, and the chief accountant had his own views as to what made sound accounting, and there were conflicts. This was a problem until the FASB came into the picture. Beginning in the early 1990s, SEC chief accountants have typically remained in office for only 2 to 3 years and have mostly been recruited from the major audit firms, as I have mentioned before, and were therefore much less likely to sit in judgment of the board's positions, especially as the U.S. accounting profession was becoming less of an intellectual calling and instead was more attuned to following rules and pragmatically solving problems. A comment that I've already made. The character of the accounting profession was slowly changing in the 1980s, increasing in the 1990s at a time at which industry was becoming more insistent about what they wanted. The backbone was weakening, while the force applied to the backbone was getting greater. The early SEC chief accountants may also have believed that the part-time members of the first 2 standard setters were not sufficiently independent of the self-interested views of their clients and companies. And this is certainly a point that is well worth making. Whether they actually did believe that, they certainly didn't say it, but that may be a reason why they were so consistently being very tight with their oversight of the body. Beginning in 1973, with the full-time Financial Accounting Standards Board, whose creation had been recommended by a study group chaired by a former SEC commissioner, the chief accountant and the commission itself may have regarded the new standard setter as much more professional and independent. And so it's not surprising that the era of collaboration more or less coincided with the era of the full-time standard setter in the 1970s, but especially in the 1980s. There were some conflicts in the 1970s in the first half because Sandy Burton was a very activist chief accountant. But after he left, then the era of collaboration pretty much succeeded the era of conflict. As far as I know, since the oil and gas controversy of the late 1970s, the SEC has not publicly stated its disagreement with anything that the board was doing or had done. They may have done so privately, because we have no idea of the meetings behind the scenes between representatives of the SEC and representatives of the FASB. With the FASB, there are numerous occasions where the SEC chief accountant or his delegate can come to Connecticut to attend meetings of the Financial Accounting Standards Advisory Council or the Emerging Issues Task Force, 2 very important agencies within the FASB, can meet members of the FASB and staff privately, discuss things privately, where people from the SEC and the FASB chat at conferences and conventions, talk over the phone, exchange emails, and from time to time have actual meetings. And so there are so many occasions where people from the SEC can meet people from the FASB, more occasions that would have occurred prior to the FASB because it is so much in the limelight and in the sunshine, the activities of the FASB, whereas the APB and the SEC they were essentially private bodies who were deliberating in private, whereas the SEC, or the FASB, especially beginning in 1978, when its board meetings were held in public for the first time, was a body that was acting in the sunshine, and included under the sunshine are representatives of the SEC. So these changes are important as well. This rather more collegial posture by the SEC toward the FASB, as if the two were on a common footing, was probably strengthened in 2003 by the SEC's instruction to the Financial Accounting Foundation that the Commission's advice be solicited in all future appointments to the FAF trustees and to FASB memberships as a part of its designation of the board as the accounting standard setter under the terms of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, and also because of the SEC began participating in the financing of the board's operations by levying a fee on issuers. In this respect, the collegial posture was easier to develop and sustain. And since the early 1990s, when the preparer community began regularly appealing to members of Congress, once the FASB seemed not to be listening to them, to fortify its opposition to a proposed or actual board standard, the government body which the FASB has had to confront publicly has been Congress, not the SEC. And this presents an interesting issue. The SEC is, of course, concerned about accounting and financial reporting and the quality of financial reporting. Congress is much more interested in broader issues, public policy issues, the future and the state of the economy, and is not really interested in accounting at all. Consequently, if somebody wants to appeal to members of Congress, like industry, they don't talk accounting. They talk public policy and say this will hurt the entrepreneurial sector. This will hurt the economy. This will create unemployment. This will not stimulate employment. This will hurt one or another sector of the economy that must be protected. They talk about public policy. If you talk to the SEC, you talk about accounting. If you talk to the FASB, you talk about accounting. And so therefore, as more and more of these issues seem to move from the FASB to the SEC and on to Congress, it seems as if accounting can become a hostage of public policy. And this is a source of concern because we should all be interested in the quality and the informativeness of corporate reporting, and not to the extent to which that happens to be in agreement with one or another public policy that is a concern of Congress. Thank you very much.